Thanks for tuning in, everyone. This is the first episode of Unholy Passion. It's with me and Ralph Schmidt, and you guys out there will know Ralph from this Everything Went Black podcast, as well as Choice Metal Matters episodes where we did classic records and stuff like that. So anyone out there who was listening to Metal Matters, I know that just from corresponding with some of you that you weren't aware that there's another podcast that I do called Everything Went Black. Welcome you guys into this, and we're gonna have a lot of fun, and we're gonna be doing some interesting stuff. So Ralph, how's it going?
I'm doing fine, Mike. Thanks for having me here. Excited for this new venture, and glad I could rejoin you here on Everything Went Black. And we balanced a couple of good ideas for what to do here. I'm stoked, man. How are you?
I'm doing good, and just for the record, I've said this a couple times, everything was cool leaving Metal Matters. It wasn't like, there was this big blowout and I got fired, or I showed up drunk to work one day and stole a bunch of shit. None of that stuff happened. It was really just my desire to keep expanding and doing more stuff, and time management too became a big issue, because for the last couple of years, for all intents and purposes, I was doing 3 podcasts. I was doing Metal Matters, I was doing intermittent episodes of this show, Everything Went Black, and also Necromaniacs, the horror podcast with Mike Scandato, and more recently Jeff Kashid from the formerly of ISIS and Palms. So it got to be kind of a grind, and I had to make a decision about which ones I wanted to continue doing, which ones I felt were more compelling, and where my interests, what my interest level was. So, unfortunately, Metal Matters was the one that I decided to leave, and I'm glad for the opportunity to work with Gimme Radio, or Gimme Metal is what they're now called. And I got to, meet a lot of cool people, and, reach a wider audience and talk to some interesting guests. And it was great that they were able to, allow me to pretty much have free reign with the format. But, at the end of the day, my interest lies a little bit beyond just metal and extreme music. And I want to talk about more stuff and have, different types of guests, and, kind of just go off more in an independent sort of mindset. And, and also the show still exists. We didn't even miss an episode. Fred Passaro and Mike Burdan took it over. And I was actually the first guest they had, which was, pretty cool, I thought. And Fred also has been a guy that's helped me out quite a bit over the years. He's used to be the editor at Noisy. He had his own website called Clairvoyant, his own outlet for a while. He worked over at Revolver for a bit. When I met him, he was the editor at Brooklyn Vegan, which is a very influential website in New York City for a while. And back when Tombs first started out, Fred was a early adopter of the band. He used to promote a lot of, he still promotes shows, but, back in the day, he was promoting a lot of shows that we were invited to play with some great bands. And he wrote about us back in the day, right away, and got, gave us press, and, and also on another level, helped keep food on my table during periods of time when I was by giving me writing assignments and inviting me to work at his, Clairvoyant at his outlet when that was happening, and can be a regular contributor there. And I wish, Fred luck. And, Mike Burdan is a guy that I recently met. He's the singer in the band Uniform. And, he's a talented guy. Uniform is a pretty cool band. And, I think that I left it off in good hands. And it's still going to be every Tuesday. And anyone out there who was listening to Metal Matters, please continue to listen to those guys, because it's going to be a different type of show from that point on. So there you go.
Cool.
Yeah.
My new favorite image now that I will keep in mind for bad times is you showing up drunk at work, stealing some stuff. It's just like when you just like said the stuff you said, I'm like, man, that would be so funny because I've never seen you drunk or anything, but I've seen you in modes where it's sort of like where you're like intimidating and just like a drunk Mike showing up at work like, give me what the fuck's wrong here? I take this and I take that. fuck all you guys. That would be entertaining. So yeah, this is my new what do you call it? My sweet spot? No, my fuck. How do you call the place that you go? My happy place. That's
Happy
it.
place.
That's yeah. Mike Hill stealing stuff drunk at work's my happy place.
That should be what we should rename this episode. This show. We should rename it Mike Hill's Happy Place, featuring Mike. But
Ralph and his goon friend from Germany.
But yeah. So the way things are going to break down is that Ralph is going to have, and we're going to have Ralph and Randy both involved in the show. So, twice a month, we're going to have Ralph, Unholy Passion. That's going to be the name of the show, so you can identify it on your feed. Randy's going to come on for Road to Ruin. That's with Randy and me. And then there'll be just 2 other episodes where I have a guest, an interview, or observational stuff, which I've been doing for the last year. Was literally just doing the Plague Diary observation, episodes, with some storytelling and things like that. So it's a little bit different. Randy and I are still going to be talking about classic records. That's primarily what we're going to be doing. I know people really enjoyed that when we were going to obscure stuff, and I think that's going to be the focus. Like, for example, we had a blast talking about Iron Maiden Killers and Iron Maiden Number of the Beast, but everyone, you can go anywhere and find people talking about those records. But I think Randy and I are going to dig deeper into the more obscure spectrum of things, and talk about bands that, maybe you guys aren't that familiar with, that were important to us back in the day, or, stuff that might be surprising, or just new bands that are brand new that maybe don't even have a record deal or anything like that you need to hear, so.
Yeah. That's cool. I always like these episodes too, and it's like I've said before, like you guys have such a great chemistry, and like old guys nerding about like obscure bands is always the thing that I enjoy. So cheers to Randy, and looking forward to hearing those Road to Ruins episodes.
Yeah, they're gonna be fun, man. And that title is like, because like in some ways, like both of our lives have been ruined by music in some ways. It's like, this like fucking, Peter Pan journey into darkness, by trying to do bands all these years and trying to like tour and make records and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of like the byline of that. It's like a double-edged sword, I guess.
But it's like it's the thing like a lot of people can relate to that play in bands like we do. I mean, I know the same thing. We all have to work hard and do the grind to have that hobby that costs us money. At some point, if it goes well, you at least make the money back from your expenses and maybe like a few bucks on top, but it's not like remotely the percentage that you can live off. But we still do it because it's just the way we work. Obsessing about music, writing music, doing the grind, going on tour, meeting awesome people that we would never meet in other ways. Yeah, so I would never trade it in for the world.
No, definitely not. I mean, it's, and then if you do it long enough, you have to get comfortable with knowing that you're different. You know what I mean? That you're not like, I have like a real job too, where I work with engineers and shit. So it's like, you gotta be comfortable with the fact that you're not the same as them. Like that you're never gonna be like one of these people, and it's like, not that it's bad, but you have to just be comfortable knowing that they're not going to be able to relate to any of the things that are important to you, like the stuff you just mentioned.
Until the moment you show up drunk for work and steal stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So some of you probably heard this before, but Ralph and I have been friends for a long time, and we covered this before. But if you haven't heard the story before, Ralph and I met when my old band Anodyne first toured Europe, and that tour was particularly brutal. And some may even call that tour a complete failure. But I actually don't look at it that way. I just look at it as like that's the first time that actually the first and only time Anodyne ever went to Europe. But it was it was an adventure, man. And had I not done that, I wouldn't know Ralph. And Ralph, one of my fucking best friends, man. So I'm glad that we did that.
Yeah, of course. It's always the small things. Like I think from every shitty tour I did, playing to literally no people, with vans breaking down, getting broken into, engines freezing, shit like this. There's always this one thing where you say like, it was still worth it. And yeah, man, it's just like our friendship has been one of the pillars, like one of the longest lasting things in my life. And I treasure this so much. And we're like moving towards our 20 years anniversary, man. It's cool.
That's the funny thing about getting old is like when you look like 20 years seems like a long time, man, but it kind of isn't.
Yeah.
It's like you look at it like when I was 20, that was my whole life, my whole lifetime,
Yep.
And the 90s came and I was still a relatively young man, but now the 90s were like 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. And it's like that is someone's total lifetime, it's like a lifetime ago for some people.
Yeah, my kids in school, like when I have to write the year's end papers, I always have to fill in like blanks and shit, and it's just like, okay, so let's see, birth date 2007. Oh my god. It's just like, oh god. And it's just like then you have PTAs and there are like parents sitting in front of you that are younger than you and they have 2 kids and you're like, oh man. I mean, I'm 41. I don't consider myself really old, but now like like all of a sudden when you have like an Instagram or Facebook feed and there's like, so this record that you totally love just turned 25. This record you absolutely adore is like 35 years old. This record you like treasure has been done even a year before your father got horny and made you, like it's incredible, man. Yeah.
Well, what another trippy thing is like in the 80s, when I was even just saying the 80s, that seems like someone talking about the 50s or the 40s to some younger people, Yeah. But in the 80s, I remember like classic rock started being a thing, like album-oriented rock. Bands from the 70s were like older bands, like Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin and UFO and Judas Priest and all that kind of stuff was like thought of as bands from another generation, So now, Dead Guy, Bloodlet and those types of bands, Neurosis or whatever, might be thought of the same way that we thought of Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath.
Yep. This is. I just had to talk about this whole. I mean, not that I consider That Guy or Kiss It Goodbye and these bands like in this realm, but this hardcore music. I always think of these bands more like hardcore bands that were like hardcore in a different kind of way.
Yeah.
Like that have like more metal influences, but still are not metal bands. But this always went hand in hand with this screamo thing, chaos core, emo core, whatever you want to call it. And this is such a deadbeat genre. It's like I still have like a bunch of friends who still like Orchid or I don't know, Page 99. And it's like, wow, creepy. Yeah, these bands they didn't age really well. But if you like put on That Guy or Kiss It Goodbye and Bloodlet, you're still like, oh man, it's old, it sounds different, and it's still so good. And it's in this realm of obscure bands that, again, like what we talked about, what you and Randy want to do. It's just like bands that only a handful of people know and forever will treasure. And most of these guys, they don't even know that they did something that is so meaningful to others. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing too, it's like, and this is something that I think we've talked about is hardcore music versus like rock, like hard rock.
Yeah.
Most of those bands only put out like one classic record, really. You know what I mean? Like in the
Yeah.
hardcore world. I mean, you can
Yeah.
say like Fixation on a Coworker was like Dead Guys, like classic
Yeah.
record, and you could say like Entheogen was like the Bloodlet record,
Yep.
and but it's funny. My friend Morgan from Black Ops always like confronts me about how I'm like I don't like hardcore, and I kind of don't really. It's like I got to be honest. It's like I'm not a fucking hardcore guy. Like I'm just not. I always was into metal, and like I like my band operated in the hardcore world because the DIY world was like where you can do shows and but I was never like a Youth Crew fan. I never was really, wearing a Champion sweatshirt, or any of that kind of stuff, or like at least not. I used to wear a Champion sweatshirt at wrestling practice, but not like at a show. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I liked punk music more than I liked hardcore, I guess. And I guess bands like X, the Cramps,
Yeah.
the Germs, like the punk vibe in hardcore is more what I enjoyed. Like Black
Yeah.
Flag to me being a hardcore band, we're incorporating all sorts of shit like Sabbath and fucking, the Swans at some points you can hear that. And like, yeah, it was never, I like the Youth Crew shit never really rang with me. I mean, yeah, there's some classic hardcore stuff I love, like I cherish, I mean, like I love the first Cro-Mags record. I love Feel the Darkness by Poison Idea. Like, but then again, Poison Idea's got like this. They're like have a punk vibe though. They're not like a Youth Crew
Yeah.
band. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure. And I think one thing that always drives me crazy here, I mean, I think we have a big culture here of metal people that have been raised strictly on metal and that consider themselves metalheads. And these were the people at first when Ultha started that gave us shit for like, oh, they're hardcore guys. They used to be in hardcore bands and they set up hardcore shows and now they want to play black metal. And then it's just like, no, dude, that's wrong because what you see as hardcore is bands like Sick of It All or Agnostic Front and these bands. But the hardcore bands I talk about are way more aggressive, way more like confrontational in a way. Like stuff like Poison Idea and these bands, Black Flag, and also like the punk vibe to it. And it's just like like you could consider bands like Converge or Keelhaul or I don't know, Botch or Knut, the Swiss band, they're also in this hardcore realm because they're operating in this DIY hardcore punk scene. But they didn't sound like Sick of It All in these kind of bands.
No,
But
definitely
that's
not.
just like, but that's the horizon that a lot of metal people have from like, going to Wacken and seeing like, oh, there's Emperor headlining, and before Emperor, it's Madball on the main stage. So for them, that's hardcore. People in baggy shorts jumping around, and like doing like rap style vocals. And like, that's not the hardcore music I talk about.
Yeah.
My hardcore music is really fast and in your face, and the record is done in 12 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like a different perspective. I do like. I mean, Sick of It All is a fucking great band. I mean, straight up, they're
But
legends. You know what I mean? And
they are, yeah.
yeah, But I've never really been comfortable in that world. And it's like even the years I lived in Boston was like, probably the most hardcore years of my life because, I was all my roommates were in hardcore bands and like I played within that scene, with Anodyne.
Yeah.
But we weren't like playing with like Blood for Blood or any of those types of bands. But it was in that DIY world of like like Cave In and whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's just I guess the point I was trying to make is like rock music, like hard rock music, where in this subgenre of hardcore music you get one record defining a band. Like
Yep.
Led Zeppelin put out like 5 amazing records that are completely influencing the entire universe. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and this is pretty much this is also like because we wanted to talk about like what we have installed here with Unholy Passion. One idea that I always threw in, like that we said we could do now, is this either or thing,
Yeah.
where like we confront each other with like things like this. For example, two defining records for bands that defined a certain genre, for example, and then it's just like, okay, what's your take? Which one is the more essential one, and why is it so important to you, and shit like this. Because I also think like there's a bunch of bands you can name that have like a big back catalog. I mean, you just like talk to Randy about Maiden and have like, okay, this is the definite record with Bruce Dickinson. This is the different one, like, and I think that's interesting to hear these takes on like where does it sit with you, which record and why. But yeah, man, and this is mostly like a legacy thing, which is built around one record, and it's interesting to see, but why which record is so important to which person, and I think it's pretty much the stuff you've been confronted with first that always sticks.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, man. Yeah. See how I push the conversation in that direction. Yeah,
Yeah.
masterful.
Yeah, totally. You're a genius. Good.
Yeah, we had some pretty intense snowstorms over the last few weeks.
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, it's. I mean, luckily, I don't leave the house anymore, so.
Yeah, we had that. The crazy thing, we had that too, and it's pretty much a difference of 20 degrees Celsius within like 4 days. So yeah, I'm pretty certain that like a lot of people will get ill now, because like last week we were out there in the snowstorm with like heavy clothing, and now people running around in t-shirts. And yeah, the schools are opening back up. It's the first thing they do. There's just like, I don't know, we have there's like mutations of that virus that came over from the UK and from Nigeria.
Right.
And like, everybody is like, the vaccine is being distributed very slowly, very poorly. And now like some people have like both shots, because you need two shots, obviously.
Right.
But like now this new mutation, it's even more contagious and even more aggressive, and it's also dangerous for kids. And now the pretty much all the states have decided that like starting from tomorrow on, like the 10th graders and the finishing exam like grades will go back to school in full capacity. So it's
Damn.
like a time bomb waiting to happen. And it's just like, me as a teacher, it's just like, well, do you like, everybody's talking about, oh yeah, the kids have to go to school and the social issues, and the parents at home, they have to do the work and shit. And we're like, okay, so are you not concerned about all the workforce you have being a teacher and going to that shithole and like being in crosshair of this virus? But that's obviously something they're willing to take the risk for
I'm
us.
surprised that you haven't been vaccinated being a teacher.
I just like, because there was some pressure from the unions, the teachers unions. We've been moved from group 3 to group 2. So where if the vaccine is being distributed like it's been done right now, I will get my first shot maybe in July or August. Yeah, so that's group 2 now.
Wow.
With the other group, I would have been in January next year. So it's
Damn. Yeah, because at least over here, teachers are part of the essential workforce, so they get like, I know people that have gotten both vaccines that are like transit workers and healthcare, and firemen and like people that work on the ambulances and stuff like that, and teachers.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah, the
kind of
first
confusing to me.
Yeah, it is for me too. But it's I mean the first group of people they did were the retirement homes and the
Right.
workforce there,
Yeah.
which makes sense. And now, well, they have like most of them are done now, but they still have delivery issues with all the vaccines. And yeah, but some people said like, well, you want kids to go to school and you want the school to commence like in a regular like way. So why not give the teachers the vaccine? And then they're like, the pretty much what we got here in North Rhine-Westphalia was a PDF that in like that shows me how to open the window for 5 minutes
Oh man.
every 20. Yeah, that's we get like one no two FFP2 masks. So we're forced to have like medical masks now, like these surgeon stuff. We can't use the regular ones that you can sew yourself, but you have to have medical masks now. And we'll get one mask per day as a teacher and the instruction how to open a window. That's like how the government helps us at the moment.
Wow. Like, and I've always admired Germany, man. Like, as far as like modern Germany, at least, I've always admired
Yeah.
them, and this is like, in some ways, worse than the United States response.
Yeah, I mean, everybody says that Germany handled it pretty well, or you like most of Europe did, and that's actually true. I'm also like pretty convenient about how they did it. But when it comes to schools and teachers, like the big issue is that they missed the digital revolution, so to say. So we have schools here in Cologne. Like one of my best friends works as a teacher here, and every kid in the school has a tablet, like an iPad that has been paid by the government. So when he has to go to school, and there's like a camera, and so he teaches in classroom with a blackboard, gets filmed doing it, live streams it to the kids, and the kids are at home, have like the tablet. So they can do all the work there. But this is like an exception from the brighter masses because my school has a total of 30 laptop PCs that operate on Windows 98 that
Oh
were
man.
distributed to the kids. So we have 1,200 students, and so my class, where I'm the head teacher, they're seventh graders, and I'm pushing really hard. So like people have to get like something to work with, but I still have like two or three kids that live in a 40 square feet apartment, so not very big, with 8 people, and they have one mobile phone for the whole family to work with. So it's insane how big this gap is right now, and that's why they're pushing so hard to get all the kids back in school because they just don't want to spend the money to get everybody like linked to the internet and give them a proper like tool to operate with. And that's seriously retarded. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fucking terrible, man.
Yeah. But aside from that, life goes on.
That's all you can do, man. I mean, I don't know. Like, I just our numbers are coming down. More people are getting vaccinated. You know, things are.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm feeling okay. It's like, I I don't know. There's even talk of doing shows over the summer, like outdoor type things.
All
You know,
right. Yeah.
so we'll see how that happens. But yeah, it's just been life just kind of is. It's not good or bad,
Yeah.
and if it
Yeah.
skews to any direction, it usually skews to like bad. You know, so
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but
That's
hanging in there.
That's what's just the feeling that I had, like when I took my bike outside today, and just like, like I'm not the guy to like hang out in parks with a ton of people, like getting the barbecue on and shit like that. But like I have like there's a big graveyard here, like a cemetery, which is really big and it's pretty much quiet and empty. So it takes me like half hour to go there by bike. Got there, there's like one bank in like next to like war veterans memorial graves, so it's a pretty open field. Sitting there on my bench and reading a book, just listening to a bit of music, had like some water with me and an apple, and it's like the first time in forever I was just like, this is actually okay. It's not hot, it's not cold. It's just like it's good weather. There's not a lot of people, so I'm fine today. Yeah.
Yeah, I live close to a park too, and over the summer, that's what I did a lot. I would just go out there and get with a book and listen to music and read, walk around,
Yeah.
and that was like I would run in the park too because they have like
Yeah.
it's like a wooded sort of grassy
Oh,
terrain
cool.
sort of thing. So it's kind of like running. It's not like running on the street, so it's easier on my knees because I got my knees are pretty bad actually. Um,
Mm.
but but yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of tired of everything, I guess. It's taking a pretty big mental toll, and
It is.
you know,
Yeah.
and I live
Yeah,
alone, and just me and my cat, so it's kind of been weird.
it's but it's the same here. And I always tell, like, when people tell me about like the problems they have at home with the wife, and they have a kid, and they have to do all this shit at home, and you're like, "Oh, okay, well, I can't really complain, like I'm sitting here, I have a big apartment, I'm next to there's nature outside, and my money is coming in steadily because I'm a tenured of the state. And so like I'm pretty okay with it, but I see like how, like, especially when it comes to school, how much like the kids are suffering. And
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, there's like, yeah, like, and people are at the edge of what they can take. And from my, like, what I feel like is, I think this will commence throughout the whole year. So I don't see any really improvement. Like, of course it will be better when it's summer, but I don't think that we will go back to a regular way of being in the year 2021. So yeah, I don't know. Like, it takes a toll on people. It's hard. There was a dad of one of my kids in school took his own life because he couldn't cope with it anymore. And it's insane, like, how much this affects people. And I'm always like, fuck, I'm living in my own little bubble and I cope well with it. But I don't know, maybe it's just luxurious the way I can, because I always, like you are, like, we're used to living alone, and like we're fine being alone for a while, but that some people just aren't.
yeah. It's I like when it's a choice though, as opposed to this
Yeah,
mandate that has to happen.
yeah, gotcha. Yeah, I see it. Yeah, totally.
And like I go to band practice. Like we had practice yesterday actually, and that's why I'm a little hoarse today from singing. Because you don't
Okay.
if you don't sing all the time, you get a little hoarse.
Yeah, I know. We actually shot the first music video for the first single from the Ropes record
Excellent.
yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's pretty much, it was like real outlaw shit, because right now we're not allowed to meet more than one person from another household. So since our rehearsal space is on a farmer's market and a big one underneath like an industrial building, we're like, okay, so the weather is fine. The cops will be outside in the parks, like, arresting people for hanging out with more than two people. So I don't think we will have a problem. And so we took promo shots and filmed the first video yesterday, and it was fine. But we're really skeptical about, like, okay, if we rehearse as a four piece in full volume, like, if someone hears that and calls in the cops, it will be like 250 euros a head per head.
Oh man.
So yeah, they're really strict about this at the moment. And this is also what I'm like actually, like you said, it's like it's a choice, and right now this isn't a choice. And I mean, fuck all the shit right now that I can't do. Like, I don't care about most of the stuff, but like, just not saying, okay, let's go and like jam and write new songs or practice. This is really annoying. So cool that you were able to do that yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I was saying, the way that things are being handled here, when numbers start going down, they start, kind of opening things up, and like we've been practicing since the summer, really. I mean, getting
Oh, cool.
together, and and the two things I do, and because gyms are open as well, so I've been going to Muay Thai, 4 or 5 nights a week, and doing band practice. But other than that, I mean, if I couldn't do those things, it'd be very very hard. And I get tested every 2 weeks, it's negative.
Mm.
No one at my gym is tested positive. Everyone's no one's gotten sick, and Yeah, it's just it's odd like when that happens, when you're just like
Yeah,
following all these regulations and you read
yeah,
and hear about all these people getting sick, and then you don't, not, no one really gets sick. And then a good friend of mine, Garrett, who used to be in Tombs actually, Garrett, who's on,
hmm.
he got sick, he got COVID.
Oh man,
Yeah, but then he recovered like within like a week. So I don't know. It's
cool.
just, I mean, it's just such a weird, inconsistent world. And
Yeah,
since this is a long term thing, I've just
yeah.
decided that I have to make decisions about, I can't just live years on end like not doing things. So
Yeah. It's the worst thing about this thing here is right now they're doing it like on a 2 week basis. So the government always says like, okay, we'll have an assessment like meeting of like all the politicians and decide if the lockdown will go on or what we do. And the problem is like last year until let's say late summer, maybe into September or something, gyms were open, the shops were open. You could do things. It was all regulated, so like like not more than 5 people in the shop. Or if you go to the gym, like they threw out some of the machines, so there was more space and everything was fine, man. And like in my gym too, there was no positive case in the record shop I go to that is owned by friends of mine, they were really strict, like 5 people in it with a mask and nothing happened. And a buddy of mine runs a bar and they also were allowed to have like 10 people in there and 5 people outside. It was all fine. But then, like, all these jackasses were still having secret parties and raves and met in parks and hung out with 20 people. There were like weddings they busted with 150 people illegally and shit like that, and that drew up like the rates of the positive cases. And then the government had to react and they shut down the gyms. The like the only thing open right now is the supermarket, and now they're opening up the hairdressers. So that's the first thing they do, so people can get their fucking hairs cut. So and like my buddy in the bar says like, dude, if this goes on for the next 2 months, I'm fucked. I have to like go, like it's going down permanently. And this is horrible, man. And this is what drives people crazy right now. And then there's the far right in politics and the semi-right new party we have, like since a couple of years. They're trying to use this as their benefit and like instruction. Like they also like these insurrections you had like
oh
in
man,
Washington. But shit like this is about to go down here too. So like these assholes, they have like protests in Berlin and in Leipzig with like 2,000 people. No one's wearing a mask. Police is just like looking. It's like, oh, what should we do now, huh? And they mix like anti-German politics, like this is the government is doing horse shit about this, and Corona is a fake, and then there's like idiots with like German Nazi flags in the middle of that, and they're just like coexisting. Some spiritual hippies that say like we can rain dance away the fucking virus, and it's like watching the German news is like a complete shit show right now.
that's, I mean, yeah, man. It's it's. Let me ask you a question. East and West Germany, like along the former boundary,
Yeah.
politically, how does that break down? And I'm speaking from total ignorance. Like I wish I knew the answer. Is there like is like say Eastern Germany more right wing than Western Germany?
It is indeed.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's more like it. I think it's not. You can't really say it's like an east-west thing, but it's more a rural versus inner city thing.
Oh, so it's like here. It's like
Yeah,
the states, kind of.
yeah, it is. Like if I go back to my place, like when you guys came and I picked you up at the airport in Frankfurt, and we stopped by at the little town I come from. This city is cool, but if you like drive into the hills, like more in the rural outskirts, you will have like a bunch of like these old people Nazis that like tell their grandkids that like foreigners are a problem and shit like this. You have that too, but in Eastern Germany, it's really bad. So, like, if you go to the outskirts of Eastern Germany, you will pretty much find a Nazi in every second or third person you run into. And I mean, we played, especially Planks, we played a bunch of shows back then in Eastern Germany, mostly like left-wing Antifa squats or something. And then you play this show, and all of a sudden there's like an alarm going off, and you're like, what the fuck is happening? And then, yeah, we have to barricade, like put up barricades because the Nazis are coming. And then it's like really like a civil war in this small town with like Antifa punks throwing rocks at like Nazis that like throw gas grenades, and you're a band and you're in the middle, and you're like, what the fuck is going on here? And so Eastern Germany, when it comes to like fascist shit and like rural nationalism and fuck this, like there's a bunch of that shit happening. Yeah.
I always suspected that, I always suspected
Yeah.
that because, like, obviously, over the years and throughout the 90s, Eastern Germany just had like that, like this very backward sort of vibe to it. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
And everything looked old and kind of just had that like that look to it. This feel. And even
Yeah.
even Berlin is like that too. Like I
Yeah.
mean, Berlin's obviously a metropolitan city, but when you go into the part that was formerly the East, it's all beaten up and blown out, everything. And
Yeah.
yeah.
But if you go to the bigger cities, like Dresden or Chemnitz or Leipzig and places like this, so you can really see the gentrification is pushing really hard. So these cities are popular. They became increasingly more expensive because I remember that everybody like that was hip and cool moved to Berlin.
Yeah.
And now all the hip and cool people are in Berlin, and that's why they raised the rents and everything is there's not a lot of like cheap space to live if you want to live like somewhere remotely in a public place in Berlin. If you go like 50 minutes outside, then you can maybe find a cheaper apartment. But like then people started like going to the cities in the east. So like especially Leipzig, and I mean Leipzig was always one of my favorite cities in Germany. Like all the shows we've ever played there with Ultha and with Planks were amazing. Hellstrom also, and good friends there. I always loved this city, but you can really see over the years that I've played shows there that it's changed so drastically. But if you're like in Eastern German cities in these capital cities and you go outside within like 20 minutes, you will be in buttfuck nowhere. There's like really torn down houses, and like you still see like these black outsides of the houses because of the coal they were burning to heat their houses. So everything is dirty and gritty. And when you go to this, you will still have a lot of like really sketchy people. There's like a bunch of Nazi punk festivals. So it's pretty much the same as in the Ukraine. And like, like you have like these parts where it's just like totally okay to go outside with a swastika on your shirt, and you will greet your neighbor that has a swastika tattooed on his
Oh man.
on his forehead. And
His
it's just like,
forehead. It's like
yeah.
he's like the Red Skull from Captain America.
Yeah, pretty much like this. Yeah, it's really weird. And I mean, here I'm in complete west, so like Cologne is next to like next to the border to Belgium and the Netherlands. It's different, but in between here and Aachen, which is like an hour, maybe 45 minutes of a drive, there's two cities that is also infested with Nazis, and there's a lot of shit going down. So they have their hives, so like I would say, and yeah, it's just sketchy to see all this shit. Yeah.
Yeah, these last 4 years in the United States have, really like changed the way I feel about people in general. I mean, I've never really been a people person per se, anyway. But
Really?
but I feel very suspicious of people all the time now. Because
Yeah.
it's like I got to be honest. Before we had Donald Trump as president in the United States, I really didn't give a shit about politics at all. Like
Yeah.
obviously, I never have ever voted Republican. I'm not conservative. I've like, left leaning politics, like progressive,
Yep.
ideas like socially and economically and all that jazz. But it wasn't like if you voted for George Bush, I didn't feel like you were my enemy per se. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah,
how
yeah.
I feel now. I feel like if you're a Trump supporter, you're an enemy of mine. because you're
Yeah.
representing the bane of democracy, which is like the system that people died and fought for in this country, and it's almost like this anti-American thing that's going on. You know, people at that insurrection were flying the Trump flag and the Confederate flag along with the
Yeah.
United States flag, which is fucking bizarre to me.
Yeah, it is.
You know, and of
Yeah.
course, then there's all these conspiracy theories where, like, you know, even law enforcement people are thinking that, the insurrectionists were actually people in Antifa, you know, trying to be agent provocateurs. And I'm like, oh, really? Even though, like, now that people are being arrested, it's being uncovered that they belong to these, like, sketchy right-wing 3%ers and oath breakers and all this other bullshit, you know? And it's
Power metal bands.
yeah, Iced Earth guy, you know, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
so
like
it's weird.
Yeah, there was a big about the guy in the costume with the horns, you know,
Oh,
like the
yeah.
guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
People were making fun of like him looking like Okoye of Ultha because like same tattoos and also like a real manly man, you know. It's just like, oh my god, man. But I think the it's funny that the AfD, like I think I mentioned that before, like the alternative for Germany, like this new semi-right, like this party that says like we're not right wing, but they're actually like all like former Nazis and in this party, you know. It's just like we're the alternative, and they're like represented in every state now in like the people running the place. So they're like they have good percentages and they're getting better with every election. And they're also like because there's elections coming up because Merkel's like reign as chancellor is almost over, and so now they're like taking over this Trump finale. I'm going to say like, oh yeah, we don't want what is it, like this election by letters and like
the
post
mail-in, yeah.
yeah mail, yeah. It's like we won't allow this because we saw what happened in America. Blah. It's like, oh man, and they're like, when you look at their party program, it's just like 50% horse shit and 50% stuff from the NSDAP of like Hitler's party that they just like took over. It's just like, yeah, women have to be at home raising the kids again, and we have to close the borders to protect our own land and shit like this. So I think all the fucking thing that was there the whole time in the States, in Germany, in the East. I mean, look at Eastern Europe right now, in Russia, and what they're like pulling off. That shit was always there. But like people like Trump, they like pushed it out because people can finally say, finally, it's okay to voice my opinion that I'm not a racist, but I don't like this and I don't like Muslims and like the Muslims are this. It's so bad to see all of this shit. And so what you said like about like Trump voters being your enemies, it's just like I think my problem as a philosophy teacher is like I'm a big fan of Immanuel Kant and his like philosophy of reason.
Yeah.
And I think that this shows like people we're born with the ability to use reason, but people just don't care to use it. You have to learn it, and you have to willingly say, yes, I'm willing to learn, like to use my ability of reason to see what I'm doing. And people are just always like, oh no, well, I could be reasonable, but this would be to other people's benefits, and I want my benefits, so fuck that. And this is what's giving me nightmares as a philosophy teacher. I'm like, oh god, man, such stupidity, such ignorance. It's just like to have your own agenda first, and pretty much Trump is the idol when it comes to this. Like, my agenda first, fuck all the rest.
The really curious thing about it, and for a second, I just want to go back to Germany post World War One, with the the rise of the National Socialism. After the Treaty of Versailles was signed, Germany was like in a, there was like this idea that they were somehow being fucked over by the rest of Europe, and economically the country wasn't doing well. And that, under those conditions, that's when this nationalist party, and Hitler was able to rise up through that, with that sentiment. like it's superimposing that on the United States. Because I look at Donald Trump as a total fascist, man, and the fucking people that support him as like, you're supporting fascism. But the United States wasn't necessarily going through any kind of like hard times. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like economically, things were fine. I mean, yeah, there was war. I mean, there was the war machine that was raging in the Middle East. But no one had particularly been fucking us over. I mean, we're probably the fucker. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that's what blew my mind as to how many people just aren't grateful for the fucking things they have.
Yeah.
And are like, oh,
Yep.
I want more, like as like a, like the white sort of meth addicted, opiate fiends that live in the Midwest that support this fucking guy. It's like, well, maybe you should fucking get an education and try to like pull yourself out of the mire that you're in instead of trying to pull everyone else down. And that mentality is like really what fucking gets under my skin, man.
Yeah, and it's like two things to what you just said, like that come together that always bother me. So at first, I think the only answer to all the problems we have is education, and people willingly like letting like education slip by. It's like it's like when people say Muslims are equal terrorists. It's like, no, they're not. Muslims are some of the nicest people I've ever met. But if you read the Quran, and I read the Quran, if you read the Quran with just one eye, so you read one page or like one surah, and you say like, okay, I'll take this one, but I don't read the next one that refers to it and says like, so yeah, eye for an eye, if this happened first. It's just like, no, it says eye for an eye. Here, it's in the book. I'll do it like this. And so like people turn a blind eye to like the whole picture, and that's what they don't do. And I think what happened in the States, like you're totally right. There's no like America has not gone to the same shit that Germany has gone through the First World War that Hitler could take advantage of. But he's using the same methods in the way that he talks and in the way that he implies it could be better for you. I can make it better for you. And people are like, like lazy ass, broke, stupid idiots are like, oh, well, he promises me I don't have to do a lot, but like since I'm American, I'm entitled to having all this shit. And then you have someone that screams this from a stage really loud. And people are like, I mean, that's what I always found fascinating about like watching Hitler speeches in school or later on. It's the way that he talks. That's what people like. It intimidated the weaker ones. It like encourages the motivation in you. It's like the way he talks, the way he screams. It's just like it's empowering. But I watch pro wrestling and it's the same fucking thing.
Like
Ric
people, Flair and all those guys. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, dude. Like they're in the middle of the like they're yelling at their opponents. Loud shit is like, you betrayed me, and I will get back at you. And they're like doing this in this way that has always been fascinating to me. Like how much with the way you talk and behave can corrupt the morally weak and the intellectual weak, I think. And this is also which, like, if you go full circle, I mean, you both and I were like always been fans or interest, like not fans. I'm not a fan of Charles Manson of what he did, but it's just like we're like fascinated by what he did, why people did what he said, like told them to do. And it always makes me cringe when people say, "Oh, Manson is the biggest mass murderer of all time." It's like, no, he's not. He killed one person in self-defense, but he was able to corrupt other people to do the shit he wants. And this is what I always found interesting about sects and like these people that were able to tell people with the way they talk and to appeal to their mind. It's just like, this is what I want you to do, and I'm the puppeteer and you're the puppet, and now dance.
Exactly. I mean, back in the 90s, you read book about psyops and things, and that's a lot of exactly what is going on right now, and, like with the QAnon and, like when I first found out about that, I was like, "Oh, this is fascinating. This is like the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard." You know, it's right up there with
Yeah.
David Icke's reptilian, overlord
Oh
conspiracies.
man.
And I'm
Oh
like, but then
man.
I started seeing that people really believe that shit. And
Yeah.
and then I saw a documentary recently about how it was rolled out through like 4chan and 8chan and all this other, bullshit that's out there. And it's like a game. There's like gamer theory in there, and it's like this psyop that's going on, and it follows all the protocols, and it makes me wonder. Like, as I'm really going to be fascinated as the years go by and more information becomes uncovered about this stuff, like what actually is going on and who's
Yeah.
behind all this shit, because it's like a mass manipulation, and I think Donald Trump is probably just one aspect of this thing that was going on. He might have been a tool, and
Yeah.
now I'm becoming a conspiracist. It's like,
Yeah.
maybe I'm reading into it more than but part of me believes that there's like a bigger work going on, and it's kind of frightening actually.
But Mike, it's God's will,
It's God's
It's all
will,
God's
yes.
will. Yeah.
But
Because that's like,
speaking of
yeah.
what you were talking about earlier, man, like a few years ago, I was working on this piece with this writer, Vegas Tenold. It's a Norwegian guy, and
Mhm.
unfortunately, the piece never got. I have the audio for it, and that's it. But we never turned it into anything. And he wrote a book called "Everything You Love Will Burn," and I probably spoke about it on this podcast, a few times over the years. But he, he didn't infiltrate these guys, but he embedded himself with these like new like national socialists that were trying
Mhm.
to legitimize themselves as actual political parties, like in the United States. And yeah, so we had this piece about it, and it kind of speaks to what you're saying. It's like these people think that the poor white have been subjugated in this country, and there's this narrative that everyone's against us, and
Yeah.
and he wrote this right up until the night of the Donald Trump, that the 2016 elections, and
Mhm.
their whole thing was like, oh, Trump was going to be our savior and all this other bullshit. Now it's going to be on. And the night of the elections, like he texted to Vegas, "Everything you love will burn," and that's how he
Oh
came up with the title
man.
of the book.
Oh man.
Yeah, and I need to get in touch with this dude again and get his take on everything that's going on, because that's been like a few years ago. It's been like 3 or 4 years ago since we had that discussion.
Well, it should be cool, man. Because especially if he's like in this topic and he wrote this book, and now it's like after one like this whole 4 year period of Trump, I think you will have like great things to say about like what is his take on all the shit that went down. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember the name of the groups, but they were they were like, all of them were like ex skinheads, and they
Hmm.
kind of reconfigured their the PR of their group, and they renamed it, and it was like, I don't know, like the Traditionalist Workers Party or some bullshit like that. Where like,
Yeah.
that's one of those things whenever you hear that kind of vernacular, the Traditionalists, Workers
Yeah.
Party, that has like this vaguely like socialist vibe to it, the
Uh,
worker. It always ends up being some white supremacist organization. You know what I mean?
yeah. Yeah, and I mean that's the same thing we have here with this shitty AFD party. Like we had the like in Hitler's time it was the NSDAP, and from that derived we still have the NPD, so the Nationalist Party of Germany, which is like straight up right people, but they're like you can vote for them and they're on every ballot, but they're making like small numbers. But some of these people, I don't know, like again, like from what you said, there must be someone else pulling the strings, because mostly they're like dimwits, like
Yeah,
Trump is a dimwit.
totally.
But then all of a sudden this AFD thing happened, and at first I'm like, so what the fuck is this now? So like the Alternative for Germany, and they're like, you know, we're not against immigrants, but wouldn't it be better to think about closing the borders? You know, like
Yeah.
doing these, you know, like I'm eating a kebab now and then, but do we really need Turkish people in Germany? You know, like stuff like this. And then you see like the first people that are appear, and all of a sudden, like, okay, he's in that party now, and he's joining that party, and then you do like a backup check on, like background check on these people, and you see like, okay, so he's been active in this right wing group. He's been arrested for like uh, offense to like German politics because like then he terrorist attacks, no, not terrorist attacks, but like he's been on this demonstration and he did this, and you're like, oh my god. And all these scummy ass people are joining this party, but they're all like, look at us, we're nice people, we're just offering the alternative. My beard is a bit smaller than other beards. It's not because I like Hitler's beard, but maybe I am. I don't know, you know? And it's just like gross. And it's becoming so big and popular. And it's just insane. And they're getting their numbers, you know? I think like most of Germany still thinks like, what a bunch of dorks. But they're getting their numbers, and they're making good process in like making their voice appear in the public because they're provoking all the time, and that gets some people like thinking, you know. And then there are like people, you know, like colleagues in school. I mean, we have like 80 teachers in this school, and I mean, I've been fighting with some people verbally about like, you know, like the traditional religion teachers, like do like about like what right now is like they're like, oh yeah, the church doesn't get enough money right now because there's no collects in because there's no church service and shit. And I'm like, well, but isn't it God's will that we have this pandemic? You know, like
Yeah,
everything
it's
is God's
God's will.
will.
Yeah, God's will.
Yeah,
Yeah, man.
so yeah, like pretty much like we have all the shit, so it must be God's will to decimate us. So isn't it okay to like get less money? And people like this, they're also like, you know, like I have 30 kids in my class, and of these 30 kids in my class, there's like 20 people that don't have German names anymore. Isn't that kind of weird? Shouldn't we like teach more German kids? And like they're all German kids, you asshole. They all have German papers, you fucking dimwit. And then they're like, yeah, but you know, it used to be better because we only had like two or three Turkish people. You can't talk to them really, you know? It's like, what the fuck are you talking
Dude,
about?
and that's like a whole other layer to it in Europe because like at least in the United States, everyone is like something else too. You know what I mean? It's like you're Italian American, you're Irish American, you're African American, you're you know you're
Yeah.
Latino or whatever. In Europe, you're fucking German, man. It's like you're like, I mean, your people have probably been living in Germany for you know like I can't for time immemorial. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when the Sumerians like migrated into what was going to become Europe. That's probably when your people came over to live in Germany. You know, it's like
Yeah.
so. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
another layer to that sort of nationalism, which is even sketchier. You know.
Yeah, and it's just like I mean the the amount again, the amount of lack of reason with some people is just insane. And that you're like doing this job and you're living in a part of Germany like Cologne where you have a gigantic workforce because of all the industry that is primarily coming from Eastern Europe and like former immigrants and you know people that have been living here forever, but they're still like they're Turkish people, they're Russian people, they're Iranian people and shit, and they all have been living here forever. They have like German papers, and you still don't consider them German because they have darker skin than you, and you're a teacher. Really, it's just like it's insane to me that stuff like this is happening. But yeah, I mean, for I don't know, like I've been ever since I became a philosophy teacher. I'm really like one of my main topics that I teach in school that I'm interested in is like human rights and like work of Amnesty International. And like through that, I became totally not obsessed, but like really fascinated with all the racism, also in the States. You know, like like Black Lives Matter and stuff like this. And it's just like every country. has like this dark history of oppressing other people. And I mean, Germany, of course, we have like pretty much the greatest resume when it comes to this, you know. And it's just like when people talk about, yeah, we should really forget about the past, you know, we've done our share of like remorse, and now we can go on as proud Germans. Like, no, not unless, you know, like people really get that there's still a problem here.
Well, that is the problem if you want to not look at the past, because that's things tend to repeat, you know, or
Yeah.
and re-manifest themselves in different parts of the world. Like I was saying, like if you're a Trump supporter in the United States, you don't see it this way, but the way I see it is like the United States came very close to having a totalitarian government, you know.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
if these alcoholics and drug addicts that had stormed the Capitol had been successful, that's exactly what we would have had. We would have had a
Yeah.
fucking totalitarian government. You know,
Yeah.
they had planned on hanging Mike Pence, you know, and I'm like, I mean, look, I obviously am not a fan of Mike Pence, but I don't want to see the man, you know, lynched. You know what I mean?
Of course, yeah. And that's the thing. That's just the discussion. You know, like in general, that I have in philosophy too. I had this discussion with my dad. I had it with colleagues and shit that like think that the death penalty is still a valid thing in the year 2021. And it's the same thing like with lynch justice. Yeah, we have to hang Mike Pence. Like, dude, this guy was so loyal to Trump, and now, like in the last run, he's doing his job, and now you want to lynch him for that? It's absurd, man.
Well, the other thing too that everyone still believes the election in the United States was stolen. Like the judges that deemed it fair were some of the same judges that Trump appointed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
So like, you know, people are going to go on with this narrative. It's going to be a thing. I mean, I'm interested to see what kind of criminal charges are brought against him in the coming years, coming months, and all that. And now that he's a private citizen, I feel like, you know, it's time to pay the piper. You know, I think that there's a lot of people out there who've been waiting for this time to come. You know,
yeah.
especially New York State. You know, and I think that it's going to be a hard time for this guy in the future. Hopefully, I hope. You know.
Yeah. But do you think he will, like, because he's already teasing, like, I'm not done with MAGA, do you think he will, like, launch some kind of, like, a new party and, like, with, like, you know, again, people behind him that we probably will never know as a conspiracy theorist that we are, you know, with money and, like, that make it possible that he's actually, like, a figure that will return in some form?
Yeah, I think he's gonna, some way or another, that guy is gonna be around. And I mean,
Yeah.
if he tries to launch or if he does launch a new third part, another party. I mean, there are other parties out there.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean, he could take his supporters, but I don't. What that's going to hurt is the Republican Party more than anything else. I don't think that a third party, this like Patriot Party that he's talking about, would have
Yeah.
enough people supporting it to actually make a difference, really. You know, I mean, like let's
Yeah.
keep in mind that Trump has never won the popular vote in the United States. Even when
Yeah,
he won the
that's right.
election the first time, he didn't win the popular vote. You know, and
It's,
yeah, I mean, it's like it's fucked up, really, and it's like, you know, just the whole electoral college that worked when there was 13 colonies, maybe, you know,
yeah.
and that, you know, maybe, but that really had more to do with, you know, like it was like racially motivated, you know, the electoral college, and now that the
Yeah.
country has, you know, it's like expanded beyond 13 colonies, it just that model just doesn't work anymore, you know, and
Yeah.
it's biased, so.
And
Yeah.
it's still so I don't know, like I've never been to an American school. Like I always, like when I was in the States, I always wanted to visit a school, and I've never had the, like, usually when you study English as a teacher, you have to stay abroad for a term. I could avoid this because I said, like, I don't have the time and money when I studied, and also I've been driving bands forever at that time.
Right.
So my professor said, like, yeah, your English is like pretty much native language level. You don't have to go. But I wish I could have spent some time in American schools to see how this works. I mean, the whole school system is different, but also like when and how is the American electoral system being explained in school? Because
It's not.
now, okay, great, fair enough.
You don't learn
it's
any of that stuff. You like
dude.
they mention it. They talk about it in passing, but it's not like I think I mean anything I've ever learned about government, I had to learn on my own, man. I had to buy books. I had, the Constitution, like all this shit. I had to have it explained to me,
Unbelievable.
you know.
Because we have an actual subject in school that starts in fifth grade that educates you throughout the 10th grade, the political systems, how votes are being cast, and how political parties work, who is elected, and how does that work. How is it like in Europe that Europe came together? So this is like an actual subject in school, and that's always because like I had to do a fill-in lesson with some kids, and the school was still like up and running, and that was the time when like Trump started his rallying, and they were like, "Yo, Mr. Schmidt, so by now we really understand how it works in Germany, but could you explain in a few sentences how the American system works?" And I'm like, in a few words, no chance in hell, man.
Yeah.
It's just like, I know there are two big parties, I know there are others, but who gives a shit about them? And I mean, I pretty much learned my shit from watching American shows like House of Cards and shit. And I just know like this is the most weird and corrupt system with the swing state shit and like the VIPs. And I'm like, oh man, I'm out. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, and it's always these like shithole states that are the swing states. It's like these states with no industry and are operating at a deficit. You know what I mean? And it's like
Yeah.
it's just fucking weird, man. And like I remember the like in high school having maybe spending a week on government or something like that in social studies. Like it wasn't like I mean, you should I think that people should have like a significant amount of their education devoted to how the government works. The government you live with. How like as a because
Yeah.
you're not of age to vote, but you will be, and when you become of age to vote, you should understand how your vote matters.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But that
And
was
they
never
they put
really
it.
made clear to anyone, as far as I can recall. Maybe things are different now.
Yeah. Unbelievable. Because it's I mean the German system is pretty much straightforward, like it's pretty easy to understand, but like there's so much done over the last ever since I was in school, which is also now a couple of years ago, and seeing this now, for example, we have like it's called an electomat, like it's like if you go to a website and it asks you like a specific amount of questions, about 30 or 40 questions, and you just have like you have 5 or 6 options to choose from, and you click your answer, and it will tell you afterwards if this is your opinion, this is the parties that might be interesting to you to read into. And you do this in school because most kids that are not educated will end up with like populist ideas,
Yeah.
and then they will like in the end, all of a sudden, they will have the Christian party, they will have the nationalist parties, because they're just like, like, oh yeah, no, I want my family to do well. I don't care if it's not beneficial to others. But like this as a starting point in school, you have like material to work on for the next half year to tell them about how the system works, what parties represents what, how do you really read into their programs to really see what they're what they're into. And I think this is super important that people have this option. And that's why it always pisses me off when people still say like, yeah, Germans, you're all still a bunch of Nazis and you haven't learned from your past. It's just like, there are parts in Germany that are willingly ignoring the evolution and that there's change. Yes, but we're doing a lot of shit in school to have people know what our history was and will forever be, but that we can learn from our mistakes and get better.
Yeah, I mean, that would be great in the United States. I just want to revise something I said earlier, like some piece of shit state, swing states. You don't have to live in a swing state to be a piece of shit, and I definitely understand that. Like there's tons of those people around me in New Jersey and Staten Island that are total right wing fuckheads, and and a lot of awesome people that I met over the years that live out in these rural areas of the United States or the Southeast and Texas and
Yeah.
all that. So I know I get like very myopic these days about my emotional response to all this ignorance I see around me, and
Yeah.
sometimes I get a little crazy, but like I don't want to like offend anyone out there who's like lives in like Ohio or something that is like, yeah, but Mike,
Yeah.
I didn't I'm not a Trump supporter. It's like you know and it fucking bothers me that now that it's after the election and the fucking guy is out of the White House and I'm still talking about him. That's even more
Yeah.
fucked up.
Yeah, and that there's like been two attempts to like trying to get him like out for good, so he doesn't have an option to come back. And then there's like this two-party system that can still allow him to, like have a bruised eye, but still get away without any real charges for that.
Well, I have a theory about the second impeachment because there just wasn't enough time. I mean, honestly, impeachments are political. You know what I mean? It's already rigged from the beginning because everyone's just going to vote along party lines. It's
Yeah.
not. There's no subpoenas for witnesses. There's no it's all rhetoric, really. It's all a
Yeah.
narrative that has been created. They don't have any
Yeah.
testimonies or any of that kind of stuff. But what they did do is his legal team went on record saying that Trump lost the election. And I
Yeah.
think that's a very significant thing in this whole drama that's playing out.
Yeah.
And that's like, I feel maybe I'm wrong, but it felt like a tactical thing more than like, okay, yeah, we're going to impeach him and he's never going to be president again.
Wow.
Like I really
Yeah.
believe
Okay.
it was more of a demonstration of information and a presentation. And now that video they made is going to exist and going to be online forever. And
Wow.
and and it also put on record that his legal defense team stated that he lost the election. So there you go.
Yeah, it's the small victories that count nowadays.
Yeah, but there's other stuff that's going on. That's seething under the surface, like legal stuff and criminal
Yeah.
charges and all these other things. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, but it's like, people focus on smaller things and like waste their energy in witch hunting some bands or other things.
Yeah.
And I think that like the bigger picture of like this is essential stuff that people should know and focus on. Like with all this, my kids in my class where I talked about like I don't know, like the system in the States is also a bit different when it comes to this. So when I take over a class as a head teacher, I will be their go-to person for the next 6 years. So, like they go from grade to grade and they have different teachers and different subjects like everywhere in the world. But I'm their head teacher, so I deal with all the parent stuff, and I teach them in English and in music, and so like they grow up with you. I'm like some of like a go-to dad for them.
Right.
And there's like some people in our school that do their job by the book. This is like it's a 9 to 5 job, or pretty much in here it's an 8 to 4 job, and then that's that. They don't give a shit about their class. They don't put any work in it. I myself, coming from this very political background that I have, like not from my family, not so much, but like growing up with punk and in the hardcore punk scene, I put so much effort and energy and time into educating my kids in class that there is a world outside of school they have to be aware about, talking. Like I start in 6th grade when they're 12 years old. I tell them what 9/11 was and what happened and things like this, because parents don't talk about this. In my philosophy classes, I talk to 9th grade kids about death and what suicides are. And I've been criticized for that, but they go out and like I'm still in touch with old students I had, and they're like, you taught me so much that is really essential apart from like what's the simple present and what's the past progressive and shit like this. Like and I put energy into this, also the political stuff. And now like with my seventh grade class that are 13, 14 years old, I spend weeks talking about the American situation, about about what Trump pulled off and shit like this. And they're growing so fast, and like, but at least I have the feeling that they see there's a world outside the small rural town where my school is at, and that there are like bigger problems you have to focus about than like personal petty grievances and shit like this.
Right.
But in general, I think people can't grasp the whole picture, and then they focus on small shit and drill a hole into this. Like, for example, what we always talked about, the witch hunt for bands or like actors or whatever. And it's just like, yeah, it is a problem. It's maybe also a bigger problem to some degree, but the big things that are really like an urgent matter that get buried under stuff like this.
Yeah, it's more of a symptom, that kind of stuff, like it's like,
Yeah,
than anything else.